planet of ours, and imagine that 100 years from now, others, our descendants, will still look down and see this magnificent planet. But it's not easy to, sometimes you lose confidence that we'll get there, because there are many threats to that vision. And of course, the greenhouse gas emissions are the global and massive threat to the continuity of our climate on this planet. So where do you start? Well, the sensible place to start, I'll put it to you, is by looking at energy. This is a pie chart from a few years ago, but it hasn't changed fundamentally, looking at where the sources of greenhouse gas emissions are across the planet. And energy at 72% absolutely dominates as a source of greenhouse gas emissions. Some of the other ones are just very difficult to tackle, but they will be tackled eventually. But energy, it's big and it's a sweet spot because we sort of know what to do, even though it's very difficult to do it at scale. So clearly the biggest return on investment, the biggest bang for the buck, if you like, is going to come from transforming the energy system in Australia, but across the planet. The trouble is, the toolkit that we have available to us to do this is quite restricted. And it's restricted for a combination of political or social issues, as well as practical reasons, realities, if you like. So let's have a quick look at that toolkit, the toolkit that we can use in the energy domain. There are 6 major groups that I've identified there, and they're not all available for us to use. I'll say us in Australia, in many, many countries. Of course, there will be exceptions in some countries, but in the main, you'd have to say nuclear is unpopular and increasingly so. I'm not commenting on whether it's good or it's bad. It's absolutely clean, but it's unpopular. So it's not going to be part, as I see it, it's not going to be a large part of our solution over the next 30 years. Large-scale hydroelectricity, I'm talking about catchment hydroelectricity, I'm not talking about pumped hydro at the moment. It's fantastic, but we haven't built a large-scale hydroelectricity dam in Australia for 50, 60 years, and it's unlikely that we ever will. We'll repurpose some for pumped hydro, but as a primary energy source, it's unlikely to be part of our toolkit for the future. Biofuels, it's just difficult for them to scale. There's just not enough land. People have been looking at forever, and of course they will fill some niches, but they're unlikely to be part of the major solution. And then there are other ones which are good technologies, but they've been shown over the last 30 or 40 years to be very difficult to scale. So we can't rely on geothermal or wave or tidal, good as they are. So that leaves 2 fantastic technologies. Solar, of course, will be a huge part of our energy transition, our orderly transition to the future, and wind will be a huge part of our orderly transition to the future. So that, in a sense, you might think, well, it's easy, right? Well, no, nothing's ever easy. And when you look at the numbers, I think you'll agree with me, it can be quite difficult. On this pie chart, I'm not looking at all sources of emissions, I'm just looking at the energy sector. And you'll see that it's dominated at the 81% level by fossil fuels, oil, coal and gas. And solar and wind are just a component, of course, of renewable energies, a component of clean energies. And globally, I'm not talking about in Australia, but it's not that much different. Globally, in 2018, solar and wind, the cumulative installation of solar and wind till the end of 2018 contributed 1.2% of our global energy needs. So going forward, if we're going to replace oil, coal and gas with solar and wind, it's doable. It's an opportunity, but it is a massive challenge. It's 70 times more solar and wind, not 70 times more than what we put in 2018. It's 70 times more than what we've cumulatively put in till the end of 2018. So it is a massive, massive challenge. It's going to require that we have strategic commitment. It's going to require a lot of storage, whether that storage is batteries or pumped hydro or hydrogen. It's going to require a lot of storage. It's going to need a lot of long-distance interconnectors. We already heard about them a little bit this morning. And it's going to need AI and digitalisation of all those technologies that make us more efficient. It's going to need more. It's going to need at least one more thing. So electricity, of course, is extraordinarily versatile. Sometimes I think of it as a magic source of energy. You can use it for so many things. But there are some areas that it's not necessarily most adept at. And many people, not just me, would argue that we will need into the future a means of storing electricity in a high density transportable form. As a high density transportable fuel, and the leading candidate for doing that is hydrogen. Hydrogen, abundant in the universe, abundant on Earth, not freely available. You can't drill a hole and find hydrogen in the same way you can drill a hole in the ground and find natural gas. But as you all here know and are keenly aware of, you can make hydrogen from water by taking solar electricity, wind electricity, hydroelectricity, clean electricity, and cracking H2O, cracking water to make hydrogen, oxygen. You let the oxygen go, that's a good thing, and you bottle the hydrogen to use. But you can also make hydrogen from fossil fuels. There, I said it in front of the Clean Energy Council audience, fossil fuels. You can make hydrogen from fossil fuels, and I do want to talk a little bit about that during this talk. When I think about the future and how hydrogen will integrate in and help us, there are a couple of things that keep me up at night. There I am, lying in bed, panicking, thinking about scale and diversity. Can't go back to sleep. Let me take you through both of these. I'll start with scale. But I will point out that even though it sounds scary, scale is an opportunity. It's an opportunity for every single person here involved in the development world. It's a challenge. So I want you to imagine a world where in Australia, we're producing as much hydrogen, and this could be 20 years from now, could be 30, as much hydrogen in energy terms as we currently produce for LNG exports. All right? So we, as of November last year, are the largest LNG exporter in the world. So this is a lot of energy that we're talking about. It's small compared to the whole world need, but it's significant. To do that takes a lot of energy. So a few assumptions, I don't want to dwell on these, but I'm going to do this exercise on the assumption that we're making it purely from solar electricity into water. So solar powered electrolysis, the efficiency goes up if you can mix solar and wind, but for this exercise I'm just looking at solar. Good, well located with a 25% capacity factor, certain density. The last one is per hectare, but the last one's important. There are losses when you make hydrogen. And I have to assume something. I'm keeping it simple. I'm assuming that 50% is lost making it and pipelining it and doing things like that. That's my assumptions. My facts are that we exported 70 megatons of LNG last year, and that in energy density, hydrogen per tonne or hydrogen per kilogram, whichever way you want to think of it, has 2.4 times the energy density of LNG. So the equivalent in energy terms will be less than the 70 megatons. The equivalent in energy terms is 30 megatons. 30 times 2.4 will give you that 70 megatons. Now the energy content of 30 megatons of hydrogen in the sort of energy terms that we in the electricity industry like to use, that is terawatt hours, trust me on this, 30 megatons of hydrogen, the chemical embodied energy that you can expect to get back when you use it as a fuel is 980 terawatt hours. But remember I mentioned 50% losses. So to make that, I need 1980 terawatt hours. Now you can look at that and think it's big, but just to help you think how big it is, it's 8 times more than the total electricity generation in Australia in 2018. That's the NEM plus Western Australia, Northern Territory. It's 900 gigawatts of solar using that 25% capacity factor that I mentioned. So it's huge. It's really huge. In terms of land area, it's 18,000 square kilometres, which is huge, but you know what? It's only 3/4 of one giant cattle station. So if you think of it that way, it's a manageable task. Now let's be even bolder. Let's imagine a world in 2050, 30 years from now, where hydrogen is being used at a level that has been predicted through the reports from the Hydrogen Council, an international group called the Hydrogen Council. Now they're predicting that in the year 2050 that the hydrogen industry will be worth $2.5 trillion on the back of 667 megatons of hydrogen, clean hydrogen being used every year. Well, the solar energy, not the embodied energy, but the solar energy to make that is 44,000 terawatt hours, which is 180 times the Australian energy generation in 2018. It's 20,000 gigawatts. It's a massively high number. And on top of that, you've got much more than that, which would be the build of solar and wind just to provide the electricity as electrons. I'm just talking about solar and wind to take electrons, convert them into molecules of hydrogen. So the challenge is huge. In terms of square area, 400,000 square kilometres, 17 Anna Creek stations, which is actually, on a global scale, not that much. So I said there were two things that concern me. One is scale, but the other one is diversity of supply. So remember, I put up 6 categories in our toolkit of clean energy sources, and I said we've got to wipe out or discount 4 of them. We were left with 2. I don't know about you, but it scares me to think of a future where we've only got 2 primary energy sources. Now, I can give myself some degree of calm by saying the sun will always be shining and the wind will always be blowing, and that's true. But who knows what the challenges will be with land access rights, transmission lines, climate change, changing the weather, or one of those extraordinary volcanoes like Krakatoa that could lead to a month of shade. Is there a third? Could we increase our diversity? Well, hydrogen from coal and hydrogen from natural gas is something, and I understand that it's not your area, but it's something that has to be given some consideration because it's not relying on solar and wind as an input. It's using fossil fuels repurposed to make a clean fuel. Can we do it? It's a question, I don't know, but can we do it? To do it, of course, you need carbon capture and storage to actually work. I'm not going to go through the why, but I agree carbon capture and storage has never been successful economically when applied to electricity generation, but there are reasons to think that when applied to gasification of coal or steam methane reforming of natural gas, that it can work better and more economically, and we need to be at least 90%, perhaps 95% capture in order to regard the hydrogens made as clean. The process is quite simple. You start with a fossil fuel, that's methane on the left, CH4, you reform it with steam, you get hydrogen. But you also get carbon dioxide. And you need to capture the carbon dioxide, you need to get rid of the carbon dioxide. So how do you do that? Well, let's look at a particular example in Victoria. That red dot in Victoria is in the Gippsland coast, and that's a location that a project called CarbonNet has been working up for 10 years as an offshore location for storing carbon dioxide. And at the moment, a Japanese consortium working with the Australian government, the Victorian government and AGL is looking at gasification of coal from the Latrobe Valley. So the CarbonNet consortium is looking at a location off the east coast of Gippsland, and they've mapped it out in great detail as sort of a deep, deep, deep salt formation. And the idea is the carbon dioxide from the previous slide, or from the well, comes down and gets buried. If it could be done properly, it's a big if, it's a big challenge, but it would give us a third primary energy source. So I'm trying to distinguish primary energy source. Pumped hydro is not primary. Hydrogen is not primary. Batteries are not primary. Nuclear is. Fossil fuels to make hydrogen is primary, and of course wind and solar are. So I'm talking about primary energy sources here. So all of this adds up to opportunity for Australia. It's a challenge, but we've got what it takes. We've got solar, we've got wind, and we've got the land. Just having solar and wind, if you don't have land, isn't much good. So we've got solar, wind, and land, but we've also got natural gas and coal. But we're not the only ones who are aware of this. This is a competition. And you'll see that on the fossil fuel pathway to make clean hydrogen, Russia, Norway, Qatar are declared players. They're interested, they're looking into it. On the solar and wind pathway to make clean hydrogen, there's the North African and Middle Eastern countries who are well positioned with respect to Europe as a customer, who are also very interested. So 3 big challenges: scale and diversity, and I'm just adding in now competition. Keep them in mind. The realities we have to live with. Okay, quick update on the National Hydrogen Strategy. It was put forward in December of last year, and COAG Energy Council invited me to lead a COAG working group to develop a national hydrogen strategy, and we're doing this through the public service with constant discussion with ministers, because we want the ministers to own the national hydrogen strategy rather than have us just throw it at them and see if they like it or not. We've divided the work up into 5 major streams: export, gas networks, transport, the interaction with the electricity network and industrial uses, and then across there are a whole lot of cross-cutting themes. I won't go through them, but they range from safety through to governance. We put out a discussion paper early in the year. Recently, we put out a massive series of 9 issues papers, which were open for comment for the month of July, and thank you anybody here who's commented, but we've received really significant feedback on those issues paper, and I would say that we've done the data gathering. We've heard from, I think everybody who's got a meaningful comment to make has now made a meaningful comment. Where we're going is towards trying to produce a framework of agreed actions, a framework that will help the states, the territories, the Commonwealth and the companies to work together, knowing that standards and regulations and safety are well mapped out in terms of how to proceed. So to get the states, territories, Commonwealth and companies to help them to develop an industry that's safe, cost competitive, and most importantly, it's not just a benefit to one state but not the others, or one company and not the others. We all have to benefit. And if we get all of that right, going back to my open slide and coming back at the end, if we get it all right, I think that 100 years from now, it would not be unreasonable to imagine that we will still be occupying a beautiful planet. Thank you.